Now to California's wildfire fight. We have new numbers on the Boyles Fire in the town of Clear Lake.
Crews are still working to put out fires that have already destroyed significant parts of Jasper, Alberta.
It's Mom and Dad's house.
Tonight, at least 7 people are dead and more than 50 hurt as wildfires burn across Portugal.
One of the many devastating effects of climate change is an increase in wildfires, which have become increasingly severe and unpredictable in recent years. We've seen it across the globe. As a Canadian, we're mostly used to seeing it on the West Coast, but in more recent years, it seems like we've been seeing it a lot more in Eastern and Central Canada as well.
In Quebec alone, wildfires have burned more than 5 million hectares this summer, a record level of destruction. In the Cree community of Waswanipi, hundreds had to evacuate. Family trap lines and cabins burned.
We're still even just trying to figure out how much are we impacted just by this one fire. Never mind trying to figure out how are we going to, deal with the impacts of future fires.
In the States, we see a lot of severe forest fires in California, but now more often in other parts across the country. For example, Texas had a historic fire in 2024. There has been a lot of fires in South America this year. Australia has had a lot of bad wildfires, but we've seen them also in Portugal, Turkey, Lebanon. So basically the world seems like it's been on fire a lot more often than usual lately.
Some of the firefighters in the park observed flames 400 feet high.
By Thursday morning, much of the town had suffered serious damage.
For many generations, the town of Jasper and the park surrounding it have been a source of pride.
In addition to displacing communities from evacuation, impacting human health, and costing a lot of money, severe wildfires have led to declines in biodiversity across the earth. This means that we can completely lose species of plants and animals, and they can just get wiped out from these severe wildfires. And once you lose biodiversity, you can't get it back. On average, Canada spends about $1 billion each year suppressing wildfires. To some extent, wildfires have always been a part of, life, but I think we can agree that they've been getting a lot worse lately. I live near the Great Lakes and never in my life had to experience a forest fire smoke advisory when you can literally walk outside and it smells like a campfire and everything's hazy and you can't really breathe. That was wild. Remember that in 2023? So the planet is burning uncontrollably. What do we do now? Well, we can fight fire with fire. What if I told you that suppressing wildfires for the last century was one of the things that contributed to this mess? And what if I told you that we need to use fire to fix it? Because yes, I am going to tell you that. Well, really, it's the research that's telling me that. The research is quite clear. And the knowledge holders of how to use fire effectively to do this are Indigenous peoples. So let's back up a bit. Let's back up a lot.
We got work.
I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't want to do the work today.
What? What's this?
Humans have been using fire as a tool for resource management and community protection for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Fire was one of the first tools used by humans to shape their environments, and this relationship has been fundamental in the development of ecosystem structure, species diversity, and the global distribution of biomass. And over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, humans got pretty good at this.
But the truth is, when managed properly, fire is a powerful tool for maintaining the health and safety of our forests, communities, and wildlife. This carefully planned, managed, and controlled process is known as prescribed fire, or cultural burning in some Indigenous communities. Cultural burning and prescribed fire are also an incredibly important part of cultural stewardship. Indigenous people have used fire for generations as a way to protect, foster, and manage their land. So the preservation of this practice is not only beneficial, but also sacred.
And just like we talked about, fire-prone ecosystems exist on every continent, meaning indigenous peoples across the planet develop their own regional fire regimes independently. Now, traditional fire stewardship knowledge held by indigenous peoples is an example of indigenous ecological knowledge, also called traditional ecological knowledge. And this is a type of knowledge about the environment that's been learned through thousands of years of intergenerational wisdom and has been passed down orally. Now, Western science has historically not recognized traditional ecological knowledge as legitimate because it wasn't developed within a colonized framework. But this is changing, and researchers today are more often using both Western science and traditional ecological knowledge to tackle a lot of important issues, most notably those related to climate change. So for this video, I'm going to zero in on Turtle Island, also known as North America, and maybe we'll also talk a bit about Australian fire stewardship too, because it's also pretty cool.
That's not a knife, that's a spoon.
All right, you win. I see you've played knifey spoony before.
So why did people use fire in this way throughout human history?
In a word, chaos.
Chaos. It naturally happens in an ecosystem. So take your typical forest. Let's say it's a boreal forest in Canada. All the plants in this forest ecosystem compete with each other for resources. Resources like sunlight, nutrients, and water. Each forest ecosystem has its dominant plants, plants that outcompete the other plants, like spruce, cedar, fir. Sometimes certain plants can get too dominant, limiting the other plants in an ecosystem. So in our boreal forest, as time progresses, the forest would get really thick. Other plants like grass, medicinal plants, berry patches might not be able to grow. Animals like deer wouldn't have the grass to eat then, so they would leave the forest. And there would also be a lot of dead branches and brush that would build up on the ground, increasing the risk for a wildfire. Another effect of this chaos allowing to progress too far is that ponds and creeks can dry up because the forest is so thick and using up all the water. So things get very chaotic. So to shape the habitat into a healthier and more productive environment, people used controlled burning as a way to bring more balance to the forest. In this way, fire was used as a cleanser, like water, to stop a forest from becoming too chaotic, thinning it out, promoting grass growth so grazing animal species would return, stopping fuel buildup on the forest floor, reducing pests like ticks and mosquitoes, encouraging medicinal plant growth, and all kinds of other benefits.
A century of poor forest management and fire suppression has created a lot of fuel to burn. All that underbrush acts like kindling. Climate change leads to hotter temperatures and longer dry periods, which create perfect conditions for a wildfire to start. Put all that together and you have the makings of a disaster. Today's wildfires can even take out big, old-growth trees that have historically been able to stand up to wildfire. Take this piece of ponderosa pine that's been around for over 2 centuries. This cross-section of a tree trunk is about to teach us a bunch of history, so show some respect and pay attention. Before European settlers arrived, Native American tribes in the western US were already forest management experts. Many Native peoples embraced fire as part of certain ecosystems. In fact, many trees in the West, like ponderosa pines and giant sequoias, are made healthier by regular human-managed fire. The Yakama Nation used prescribed burning to keep the forests healthy and to cultivate different resources they depended on, like berry plants. But when colonists showed up, it didn't occur to them that the forests were so impressive and the timber so strong because they'd been taken care of by humans.
Most of the globe, and particularly the forests in the western US, they actually evolved with fire.
Tree rings, soil samples, and charcoal records all show a history of fire, likely started by lightning strikes and other natural phenomena. And that history shows that fire isn't always a destructive force, but an important part of forest ecology.
Fire plays this really important role where it is essentially removing a lot of the older, less productive material from the landscape, and is creating pockets and patches of different ages of vegetation. That diversity of ages also produces a diversity of species.
In many places, fire works as a reset button for the forest. It clears out dead brush and older materials and makes space for new growth.
In this way, Indigenous peoples throughout history across the planet were able to use fire to establish cultural burning practices to shape their environment to their own needs. In fact, fire has been used by Indigenous peoples for so long on Turtle Island that some plants have evolved needing fire.
For some species, fire is even vital for reproduction. For example, low-burning fires dry out sequoia tree cones enough for them to open up and drop seeds. At the same time, the fire clears the ground to expose fresh, nutrient-rich soil, which creates ideal conditions for the seeds to germinate. But aside from the ecological benefits, fires also help a forest become more resistant to high-severity burns later on. Low-burning fires clear the forest floor and lower branches from the trees. Then, if a more intense fire moves through the same area, it's slowed down by a lack of fuel.
So when you get those type of patches all over the place, it becomes difficult for fire to move through that landscape again anytime soon.
And most notably, because these controlled fires were clearing all the dead branches and lower branches on the forest floor, they were making the forest more resistant to wildfires, aka uncontrolled fires, because they were reducing the fuel buildup. Interestingly, Indigenous peoples could use fire to shape the specific ecosystems they were looking for by timing how often they used controlled burns in an area.
This project is called the Boothroyd Indian Band Cultural Burn Project. The Cultural Burn Project itself is 45 hectares in size. It's located on IR 5A. Priority 1 objective is to kind of reduce the invasive species in this particular 45 hectare piece that we're looking to burn over a period of 2 years. Priority 2 is to replenish the food resources that are currently on site. We have apples, we have berries, we have medicinal plants here that have been identified by our elders. And obviously the third priority is to reduce the wildfire risk in this general area.
So for example, to maintain a grassland ecosystem, you would do a controlled burn every 1 or 2 years. For a ponderosa pine-dominated forest, it's 7 to 15 years. For lodgepole pine, it's 60 to 100 years. Each dominant species has its own fire cycle, or length of time between fires.
The Chilcotin has a very healthy whitebark pine population. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stay like that. Whitebark pine is an endangered species in Canada. Right now, the recent data from 2021 shows that it's under threat from climate change, hotter, drier climates, white pine blister rust, and mountain pine beetle. The whitebark pine produces a cone that has a nut inside it, and it provides an important food source for people, grizzly bears, the Clark's nutcracker, and ground squirrels. The Clark's nutcracker has a special relationship with the whitebark pine because the Clark's nutcracker will bury the seeds of the whitebark pine in these recently burnt areas. So we want to test whether cultural burning can improve the health of whitebark pine stands.
Also, cultural burning fires are controlled. You can keep a burn low intensity so that it only burns the buildup on the forest floor and perhaps some of the younger saplings, keeps the older trees intact. The older trees can not only survive these low intensity fires, but they can grow bigger and develop a thicker bark, making them more resistant to fires in the future. And the heat from these controlled fires also travels down into the ground, and there's certain seeds that will only pop open when they're exposed to this heat because they've evolved to do that with fire. They wouldn't grow without it. Isn't that just the coolest thing? Imagine how long humans would have had to be using fire in this way for this to affect plant evolution.
To prescribe fire into 5 main areas. 1. Public safety and wildfire risk reduction. 2. Cultural burning for First Nations values. 3. Improved wildlife habitat. 4. Revitalized vegetation. And 5. Economic benefits. We are all too familiar with the risks of extreme wildfires. They burn at an intensity that is detrimental to our ecosystems, and ultimately can devastate our communities. Climate change is contributing to more frequent, larger, and more severe wildfires, and this trend is expected to continue. Prescribed fire can help decrease the frequency and intensity of extreme wildfires. Controlled low-intensity burning during the spring or fall removes hazardous fuels from our landscapes and creates fuel breaks that mitigate impacts of wildfires, which makes our forests healthier and more resilient. For many indigenous communities, fire is a sacred and powerful element that can help on landscapes and in ceremony. Through repeated burning practices, the indigenous peoples of the land are able to shape their own environment to their own specific needs. Indigenous communities use fire for ceremony, community protection, to sustain diverse plant and animal life, and much more. Fire benefits numerous wildlife species, and is even required for some animals to survive. Forests, grasslands, and other landscapes can become dense and overrun by invasive species, negatively impacting the animals that rely on these habitats for food and shelter. Controlled fire can bring back wildlife food sources, maintain areas required for travel and loafing, and bring balance to food chains and species. When forests become overcrowded, they often become unhealthy, making them vulnerable to insects, disease, and wildfire. Invasive species can drive out native plant life. These conditions can be accelerated by the effects of climate change.
Only you can prevent forest fires.
So, when learning about all these factors that you have to consider when using fire in this way, and just the potential to use fire as such a powerful tool to shape the ecosystem, you can see just how complex this traditional fire stewardship knowledge is. Indigenous fire knowledge holders hold a wealth of valuable knowledge, including familiarity with climatic cycles, ignitions, sources, fuel conditions, fire behavior, and landscape factors like how topography influences fires, and many other things too. So you can see how important it is that this knowledge is passed down to future generations, and how devastating it is when this knowledge transfer and fire stewardship practice is disrupted by colonialism. So what happened? Why did these fires stop, and why do we have 100 years of fuel buildup in forests across Turtle Island?
Only you can prevent forest fire. Prevent forest fire.
In the summer of 1910, the western United States ignited. A perfect blend of hot, dry weather and hurricane-force winds fed the blazes, eventually resulting in a terrifying firestorm. In just 2 days, 3 million acres burned. Full towns were turned to ash, and nearly 90 people died. Its devastation was so dramatic that it shaped U.S. forest policy for years to come, especially for one new agency. After the 1910 blaze, the U.S. Forest Service primarily focused on stopping fires. And at first, they were really effective. For decades, most accidental and natural forest fires were stopped as quickly as they began.
Only you can prevent forest fires.
In 1944, the U.S. Forest Service introduced Smokey the Bear. The goal was to educate the public on the dangers of forest fires.
So naturally, the colonizers didn't understand or value indigenous knowledge and thought the best way to stop wildfires was to suppress any fires altogether, ignoring the practice of cultural burning. Specifically in North America and Australia, colonial practices discouraged and prohibited traditional burning techniques, both through forced removal and relocation of indigenous peoples from the land to make way for settler occupation, because you can't take care of the land when you don't have access to it, as well as outright making cultural burning illegal. Colonial laws prohibited burning and saw it as dangerous to communities as well as destructive to the timber supply. These colonial frameworks disrupted intergenerational knowledge transfer because remember, all this cultural burning knowledge is passed down orally. So Even if you tried to maintain fire stewardship, you could be punished.
We have a history of our men burning our hunting grounds. Women will burn to restore their food gathering sites. So, burning is just a key tool that we use as Indigenous people to keep our environment healthy.
But colonists began placing strict laws against burning as early as 1850, criminalizing the long-held practice. After the 1910 blaze, legislation against all burning only became more strict.
Indigenous people could be shot for burning.
Our creation stories have fire and talk about when we were putting fire on the land and how should we take care of Mother Earth. Indigenous people have lost that to colonialism.
It was taken from us. Since the early 20th century, the United States has adopted policies to extinguish any and all wildland fires, which is now known as the era of fire suppression. And it effectively outlawed Indigenous peoples' use of fire to manage landscapes and maintain wildlife habitats.
And they started killing people, hanging people, raping people. If you started fire, if you got in their way.
There was this thought process that all fire is bad fire.
This prohibition of burning by Indigenous peoples happened in both North America and Australia. And this protection of forests was done in large part for the timber industry. Forestry and timber companies believed fire had to be eliminated from the landscape in order to encourage timber regeneration and to keep up revenue. So you could say that the widespread ignoring of Indigenous fire stewardship knowledge was fueled by both racism and capitalist greed, yay, colonialism.
I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty.
You can excuse racism.
And I found sources saying that in California, at least, these interests were also fueled by the real estate sector because there's a lot of large estates and mansions in fire-prone areas, so they thought that they were protecting them too. And at first, it seemed like this fire suppression technique worked. For example, in California, fire frequency was reduced by 94% in the 20th century. And I guess if you see all forest fires as bad, then you could call this a success in the short term. But as we know, things are a little more complicated than that. Ugh, why is Smokey the Bear so confusing?
Only who can prevent forest fires? You pressed U, referring to me. That is incorrect. The correct answer is you.
Oh, and quick side note, did you know that the national park system was also racist? In North America, Indigenous peoples were forcibly displaced from their lands so that those lands could be designated as national parks. And then the government could say, hey, look at this pristine wilderness, untouched by humans. No one has ever lived here, we promise. I hate everything. So although this tactic reduced forest fires in the short term, it was literally a setup for disaster in the future.
We are a powder keg about to explode. I need someone like you to lighten the load. So
as we talked about earlier, fire suppression allowed forests to grow really dense and really thick and really chaotic over the last century.
Chaos! I am Professor Chaos, bringer of destruction and doom!
So there was about 100 years of forest floor buildup all across Turtle Island. So if a fire should occur, say due to heightened temperatures and more extreme weather conditions in general, I don't know, just as a hypothetical, what do you think would happen?
Boom.
Boom, yeah. I understand boom.
Bada boom.
Big. Yeah, big bada boom.
Big. Bada big boom. Big.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, big bada boom.
Bada boom.
Big boom. Big bada boom.
So we began seeing the start of the big bada boom in about the 1980s, which is when both the size and severity of wildfires began increasing greatly. We see this particularly on the west coast of Turtle Island and in Australia, because those areas are naturally fire-prone and were managed extensively by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and then all of a sudden this stewardship was taken away.
My name is Rory. I work for the BC Wildfire Service and fortunate enough to be able to spend the day today with Two well-respected people with the Interior Salish Firekeepers, Harry Spahan and Joe Kilchrist, to talk about cultural, traditional burning, Indigenous burning practices day to day, and just get a chance to learn from these two gentlemen. What is cultural or what is traditional burning?
For me, I think cultural burning is knowing the land that you're on, and over thousands of years, the fire was added to the land to enhance if something was lacking, if it was getting too thick to go through, or the plants weren't producing like they were, it would have been burnt.
There's a lot of traditional kind of things when they came here to do the cleansing of it and stuff and offerings. We're taught that there was always kind of a prayer when you come to the land and before you did any ignitions and offerings and stuff like that.
So as you can see, there is a lot of tradition and ceremony and weight that's a part of this cultural burning, and it was forcibly stopped by colonization. And now, a few decades later, we're seeing that things have gotten a lot worse. In particular, I do want to highlight that Indigenous peoples in Canada are 30% more likely than non-Indigenous peoples to be displaced by and suffer from the impact of wildfires. 60% of Indigenous communities in Canada are located in remote forested regions and generally lack government financial support to mitigate fire risk.
There's always wind here. It's one of the things that is remarkable about Lytton. So with the wind, we know that fire travels incredibly quickly and can be quite devastating.
Our community was annihilated by a fire in 21 under conditions that would have been almost impossible to have witnessed unless you were there.
The communities themselves are dealing with the trauma that comes with that. I have nieces and nephews who are 5 and 6 now. When they see a cloud in the sky, they'll stop and they'll ask, is that a cloud or is it smoke? You can't close your eyes to it here, so everyone's very well aware of it. The only thing that's changed in the last 2 years is how we respond to it.
It's been a hectic year for us. It all started back in August 17th, I believe it was, when the Kukubee fire blew up. We came up to this area here to check it out, and that's all we seen was a big flume of smoke from that area. So, and I personally went out to Nahabatch just to take a closer look to see what was going on. And I seen how aggressive the fire was, so I came back to the community and told them to get ready to pack and leave.
We've never been evacuated before. The fire grew so fast that we were moved. A lot of damage in the Nahatlatch Valley and the Kukubee Creek area, and also in Inkasaf and Blue Lake.
It has burnt a lot of traditional areas, such as harvesting of mushroom areas, berries, a lot of berries, hunting grounds we've lost, historical sites we've lost too. It's quite devastating to us.
Past summer there was a wildfire that was coming over the mountain to our west. It got into a piece of our territory in Bridge River.
Last year was devastating, seeing the effect after the fires, and it's scary to see complete annihilation of the landscapes. My name is Russell Myers-Ross. I've been chief for about 6 years. 2017, wildfires broke out, and just as you see behind me, got very close to the community. Like 2017 fires happened, it surrounded our whole community.
Destroyed thousands of hectares of beautiful landscapes and animals, and destroyed homes and people's lives.
How did it feel when you saw the land after the fires?
It was sad for sure.
So solastalgia is basically people feeling deep grief for what is lost and what you are no longer connected to. People will have that sense of loss of place and that emotional reaction to the changes we're.
So these videos that I'm using clips from are from the organization Gathering Voices Society. It supports environmental stewardship programs for Indigenous communities, and they have a specific project on fire stewardship. And the other video source that I'm using is prescribedfire.ca. And they have a lot of instructional information on carrying out cultural and prescribed burns. And not only the cultural knowledge of how to carry out a safe burn, but also how to navigate all the legal stuff, like getting the right permits and things like that. Both of these organizations are Canadian and both are based in British Columbia specifically. And these organizations have a lot of great resources and videos outlining both the background of cultural burning as well as its resurgence. I'm going to draw from these a lot more later in the video as well. So getting back to the topic, not only has Indigenous cultural knowledge of fire stewardship been suppressed for the last century, but Indigenous communities are disproportionately being affected by the impact of suppressing this knowledge, i.e. the increase in wildfires. So now we've got a century's worth of fuel buildup across Turtle Island combined with increased temperatures and more drought brought on by climate change. So when wildfires do happen, they get amplified in both the size and the severity. And contrary to controlled fires, which are very specific in what they target to burn, wildfires just burn everything. It was at this point that the governments of Canada and the United States thought, hey, maybe we should be using these prescribed burning methods to help control the wildfires. We might as well because this continent is getting pretty flamey. It's at this point that I want to talk about the difference between cultural burning and prescribed burning.
Cultural burns. But there are key differences between those agency burns and cultural burns. And while they are working together, Indigenous communities are on a larger journey of taking back their ancient practices.
When they removed fire, they didn't just remove fire, they removed a lot of our cultural ways. We're finding our way back to fire through that loss.
That cultural burn is not about fire. Cultural burn is about the community, keeping our traditions alive.
This is a story of how Indigenous peoples lost our right to burn in the United States and how we're reclaiming it.
So government agencies had started using prescribed burns as part of their fire management techniques, which is better than the previous method of just trying to suppress any and all fires. But then comes the issue of not using this knowledge properly. So from what I understand, the issue seems to be essentially that governments are cherry-picking aspects of cultural burning and then they're using it to do these prescribed burns, as opposed to using the knowledge holistically and the way that an Indigenous knowledge holder would use it. So as an example of this is in California, a fire management agency destroyed Karuk ceremonial trees as part of a fuel reduction project. So they were just ignoring the parts of the fire stewardship that they don't think was useful, particularly the spiritual and cultural components of it. And this is not only an issue on Turtle Island, but also in Australia too. There has been a resurgence of Indigenous-led cultural burning. In Canada, First Nations have the right to undertake cultural burning on their lands, but they have to do it with significant wildfire agency oversight and control. So it's still restricted by colonization in this way. And although government agencies are becoming more accepting of controlled burning techniques, there's still a long way to go in terms of full acceptance. Remember, we're coming up off of 100 years of convicting, finding, and jailing Indigenous peoples for fire stewardship. So although cultural burning is becoming more accepted, there's still a lot of bureaucracy involved when planning one. And the Canadian government only recognizes the right to cultural burning on First Nations reserve lands, so there are additional major barriers across broader Indigenous territories, a lot of which is considered to be Crown land and under government authority. So these government agencies still get the final say on whether a burn happens or not. So there's the broader issue of Indigenous treaty rights not being fully recognized by Canada. But still, cultural burning is happening.
In the springtime, we, of course, wait for the snow to disappear. And you could actually see the snow line move up the mountain. That's kind of an indication that it's getting ready to burn. And you just watch the fuel, and you could pick up the pine needles. It's been raining, so this is not ready to burn. But when it's dry, it'll just snap. So that's another indicator. When you're walking or driving a vehicle on the road and it starts kicking up dust and stuff like that, then you know that it's getting time to burn. And then you just have to decide what you want the burn to do. Like here, we didn't want to kill the trees and stuff, so we just wanted a low intensity burn to go through this area here. So we would probably burn it at nighttime or in the evening, so it's a little bit cooler, and also to control the flame fronts by using layers of fire rather than just letting it go from one area and let it run. So we would just layer it.
The name of the project is the River Valley Prescribed Fire Project, and it's taking place here on Leewat Nation traditional territory. What's unique about this Prescribed Fire Project is its size. We're burning up to 80 to 100 hectares in the River Valley.
A burn proponent is a person or group that brings forward the idea of the project, and in this case it was Lillooet Nation. There's a history of out of control burning in the past.
After one of these fires that were lit naturally, the leadership called us all together for a debrief, and at that debriefing they had me look into a prescribed fire.
Lillooet came forward asking partners to help them do it in a controlled manner so there isn't any emergency situations in the area.
The specifics behind this one would be for the safety of the community, because we have a number of old log homes that date back to probably 1940s.
That adds a bit of complexity where we have to put in quite a bit more prep work to make sure we're protected on all those sides where there are values like that.
So a prescribed fire program has different steps in it. The first is your planning piece, and that's where we went in and we did our pre-fire effects, because some of that pre-fire effects also will feed into your objectives as well as your prescription. Is this what we want and how are we going to achieve it?
Our pre-meetings are very important, like the calls and this site meeting that we're having today, just to make sure everyone's in the conversation, asking questions so that there's no surprises on burn day. So with this project, we'll have anywhere between 40 to 60 people involved, and that's from ground crew to people in supervisory roles. It's been a great project where we've been able to collaborate with a number of different agencies, going back to that objective of just training and continuing education.
Fire is, I guess, an extreme way to control it, and we do hope to change that to an agricultural view of controlling it.
Pemberton Fire Rescue was here to support the implementation of the burn itself, specifically with extinguishment on the outlying areas around the structures, making sure the fire is completely out when it gets to the structure areas.
The community engagement is really good. They're able to see the crews from the BC Wildfire Service do their work, and they could see the type of dedication they have for that kind of work to get it over and done with safely.
CTS's approach at the Glacier Creek project is a great example of sustainable forest management. Prescribed fire was used after the harvest to reduce forest fuel load and achieve a variety of other objectives. Prior to planning for the project, BCTS developed a Forest Stewardship Plan, or FSP, a legal document that identifies plans for road building, carrying out forest harvesting, and performing silvicultural activities such as tree planting and brushing. Once approved, BCTS developed site-specific plans and completed assessments of the area's archaeology and hydrology, visual impacts, terrain stability, invasive plants, species at risk, and forest health.
We want to start looking at trying to, get out there and start putting fire to the land again.
I'm Bradley Jack. I'm from Houston, and my role here in the culture burn is the burn boss. This project is the Houston Culture Burn, and this is on the Houston territory, Statlium territory, and Bridge River Reserve. There's 3 different plots on this culture burn. The first one is 78 hectares. Second one, I think, is 53 hectares. and the last one is 18 hectares. There's a bunch of partners involved. There's hoisting crews that are doing the fuel management here. T-Kit Band, they have their own 5-pack of contract crew that they come and help. BCWS.
The project we're on is the Houston project. It's part of the Statliam Nation, and it's 150 hectares in size. And we're basically doing it in partnership with the Houston Nation. The overall objective is to create community wildfire protection. They wanted us to assist them as part of their field management project that they've done in and around their community. They also want to reintroduce fire back into the ecosystem.
One interesting thing I found in my research was how cultural burning practices are being shared. So, as we talked about earlier, because fire stewardship was banned for so long, a lot of intergenerational knowledge sharing didn't happen. So one project I looked at in British Columbia involved bringing over a fire knowledge holder from Australia to share his knowledge. Victor Stephenson is a descendant of the Tagalaka people in Australia, and he is a fire practitioner there. And Gathering Voices documented how Victor came over to British Columbia and shared his own knowledge on how to carry out cultural burns there.
Grow, and the berries grow, and the animals come back. So the whole idea of this is to activate landscapes, to bring it back to life and connect people back with that. And we've got green, beautiful country underneath.
I think for us, bringing Victor Stephenson out from Australia, this is important for us just in revitalizing our own cultural practices, and this is something that's been done for generations on generations, and something that's been suppressed. We're just trying to reinvigorate something that was always within us. With that cultural exchange where we're learning from each other and restoring the land.
There are a lot of similarities between Australia and Turtle Island in regards to fire stewardship, and they also share a similar colonial history.
Prior to European colonisation in Northern Australia, the whole landscape was effectively managed by fire, and people would get out traditionally and be burning as soon as the country dries out. But with the displacement of Aboriginal people from about the 1850s on, and really from the turn of the 20th century, that whole system of fine grain management broke down, and we start to get the imposition of huge wildfires late in the season. And if you could reintroduce traditional approaches to fire management, get things done early in the year, you can show that you can reduce emissions on an industrial scale.
To us, it means full belly. This is where we used to come to get a feed. And so they'd burn the land so the animals would be here when they come back. Over here, look, a lot of ash here, but you just brush it aside. There's new shoots coming through. There's also seed there too that would have been cracked when the fire went over it. So it's very cool. So there's a lot of moisture still in the ground here.
With our cultural knowledge, 60,000 years of it, it's designed to look after that land. It's all about sharing knowledge, and the whole community needs to come on board.
Most of our property, all the trees on it, are regarded as ecologically endangered communities. There are about 4 to 5 different ecological zones on the property. We have coastal red gum forest, we have casuarina, mahogany, lots of hollow-bearing trees, native grasslands. We have so little coastal bushland left that it's unbelievably important that we sustain and we protect that coastal bushland.
A lot of these headland areas and the coastal areas are really significant to Indigenous communities up and down the coast, so to get private landowners on board and to acknowledge what importance it has is really important. It's more than just a burn, it's a healing process. My grandfather was part of the stolen generation actually, so that's where that knowledge gap has been missed, and I'm just grateful that the uncles and the elders and and everyone has inspired me to reconnect with culture and reconnect with country. Yeah, it hits home for me, yeah.
From this video of a cultural burn in Australia, you can see how the whole thing is a community experience. It's part of healing, not only healing the land, but it's also a way to reclaim traditional knowledge and heal the spirit from the effects of colonialism. And there's a lot of similar videos documenting cultural burns on Turtle Island too. There's a video on YouTube called Good Fire that documents cultural burns in California. And by the way, if you look below, I have all the videos and resources that I've used in my Zotero link. This video documents burns conducted specifically by the North Fork Mono Nation, and they talk about the reasons for the burn. They talk about the way the burn is carried out, and they also talk about the steps that they have to take to make sure the fire is approved by the government.
I posted California to join Chairman Ron Good of the North Fork Mono tribe and participate in his cultural burn.
Had a good trip? Hi, good morning. Oh, check you out. Right.
Chairman Ron Good's burn is less of a public demonstration and more of a cultural burn ceremony, where elders like him can share and practice their knowledge with other tribes and allies.
Hoping you can make it.
It's important for cultural fire practitioners to not just revitalize the practice, but also carry it forward.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Wow, nice crowd. Nice crowd. I'm going to be transparent with you in the sense that we have to look and say, you know, what happens down the road? What happens when I'm gone? Cultural burns about cultivating the culture, keeping things alive, keeping our language alive, keeping our songs alive, keeping our traditions alive, and how we need to look to the future if we want a future. Everybody's excited. Indigenous communities throughout the world feel the same, that when they're taking care of their lands, their landscapes, that what they're doing is taking care of the responsibilities that were given to them by Creator. And the fact of the matter is that prescribed fire, agency fire, doesn't work. Oh, yeah, it takes fuel reduction, but that's all it does. It don't restore, it don't regenerate, it doesn't rejuvenate. In contrast, what we've been doing over the years is to train folks to be leaders, and now they're off in their own areas.
I've been burning with Ron for multiple decades.
He put fire on the land after 200 years. So this is what our goal was. Are we actually in a free America? Did somebody call you in?
Yeah. Yeah, we just had a neighbor concerned.
Well, I have a permit already.
Okay.
I get a permit every time. I'm Ron Good.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
All right, what kind of permit do you guys get? Is that through the air?
With cultural burns, we typically hold them in partnership with other entities, either private landowners or public lands. And a lot of that we have to get certain permits and we have to follow certain protocols.
You want to see it?
Yeah, sure.
No problem. They should have been well notified.
So one of the barriers that we recognize in cultural burning is that there's a lot of regulation around burning, and rightfully so. We don't want to have people burning when there's a clear and present danger for that fire to become a catastrophic wildfire.
How long are you guys going to be doing this burn?
Through Sunday.
Through Sunday?
It was an interesting clashing of worlds, you know, to feel as though we can have cultural burn demonstrations more so, but then to have, you know, maybe people cautious about it or indifferent feelings about cultural burning and prescribed burning.
All right.
Yeah.
You guys be safe.
Oh yeah, we're fine.
All right, have a good day.
Okay.
I think we're all working towards the day we can exercise true sovereignty and be able to hold cultural burn demonstrations on our own terms.
So in the video, you can see that they get stopped to make sure that they have a permit. And these controlled burns are really carefully planned. They plan out not only how the burn will be carried out, but also when. Wind is a key factor in whether a burn will happen. So if the conditions on the planned burn day aren't right, the burn will be postponed. Generally, when a controlled burn is taking place, there's what is called a burn plan, which outlines all these details. So if a community is wanting to do a cultural burn, they have to do a burn plan and submit that to the government authorities for approval. Burns can be planned for a lot of reasons. They can be done to promote the growth of desired plants like berries.
Years ago, all of our people used to come up here to pick berries, right? The whole community, and even, I think it was even some of the neighboring communities used to come up here to pick berries. So
I used to come up with family members and that. We'd come up by horseback. There was no roads here then. We'd come up and camp for a couple of weeks, and that was the main thing. We came up for the winter supply of huckleberries.
We've wanted to introduce fire back into the landscape as it was traditionally done. So
one of the main objectives was to see the science behind if we could produce more berries by burning the cut block versus just having a clearing and a logging opening.
To help with the nations with the berries is also helping enhance the food for the grizzly bear. So it's working with both the wildlife and with the nation to do what they want for the cultural significance of it.
I also found a video where a burn was planned to promote the growth of an endangered potato species.
Our ancestors and people gathered potatoes for the winter, and this place has been here forever. This has been here for generations. Everybody knows of this spot. Everybody comes up here every year to collect potatoes. Over the past few years, it's been declining because of the impacts of animals. Horses, cows, deer. I think putting fire to land is going to regenerate and renew. We're hoping that brings everything back to where it once was, because it's a very important sustenance for our people. Like it's something that's always in our mind. We're always talking about it, and when that time of year is coming around, everybody's getting excited and looking for that white patch on the mountain, because we know that white patch is showing us that our potatoes are ready, but it's just not as abundant as it once was.
And they're also planned to promote growth of medicinal plants as well.
There was a lot of what we call tobacco in that area. There was endangered species in that area. There was water in that area. Everything that you wanted to look for was there. Our people have always used that area, whether to harvest roots, whether to harvest medicines or animals.
But burns are also carried out for community safety. As we talked about earlier, a lot of Indigenous communities in Canada are located in very remote and fire-prone areas.
One of the reasons we're doing that treatment here is we feel that the biggest risk is advancing in this direction. So if we treat this large area here, it will help mitigate the fire effects on homes further up the valley. We're living in one of the highest risk areas of the province, as we know. So what we're hoping to do is manage that risk through manual and mechanical fuel treatments, but also prescribed burn. So just following we have a number of different regimes that we can use. And this is one of the regimes is we're going to burning a grassland type ecosystem without doing treatment ahead of time. So it's one of the ways that we can manage it.
Any community that sees this work as overwhelming, there's no step too small or too big. You have to get on it and manage your land, embrace it, and learn from your teachings.
The forest fires, they come in and they change everything because everything's so interconnected. From the movement of our game to the movement of the predators, right? The different birds that come in, everything's impacted. So I would rather see fire used in a good way to be able to protect the homes and the infrastructure and the culturally important places than to not use fire and just be left with what it does when it's being used destructively.
Cultural burning can be used to mitigate wildfire risk by conducting low-intensity burns in the area surrounding a community, therefore reducing fuel buildup and making that area more fire-resistant, with the idea being that this would essentially act as a fire block to protect the community from any nearby wildfires. And you can also appreciate how in a community that has perhaps already experienced a wildfire devastation firsthand, this cultural burning might be kind of scary, taking place like right next to you. Not only are communities affected by wildfires nearby, but often a lot of community members work as firefighters throughout the region, which is a very dangerous position.
Colors are the colors of the medicine wheel. The yellow is the physical, and the red is the emotional. The black is mental, and the white is spiritual. Our spirituality has been hit hard. You're going to pray into this ribbon, and the ribbon is going to be hung in the medicine wheel, and your prayer will be sent to Creator. What we were meant to do was look after Mother Earth, and we've lost that connection. So all of these colors will, and the medicine wheel connects us to all things.
I'd like to start off just by saying thank you for all that BC Wildfire did out there. What they did is saved our community from burning down, and there's a lot of memories that are lost and a lot of area burned. Very prestigious valley for us. There's berry picking, gathering, hunting, fishing. All those aspects are can be affected by this fire.
So although cultural burning is happening more and more often in Indigenous communities, there are still some barriers to its resurgence, and these barriers are largely either related to meeting government requirements as well as capacity and resources to conduct a burn safely. So there aren't a lot of wildfire training programs in Canada, and as of a 2022 paper I found, there aren't any post-secondary programs on Indigenous Fire Stewardship, which a lot of people might argue that you don't need validation from a colonial institution, which I think is fair. But I also think that these programs can help with passing along knowledge and skills more broadly and faster. Another barrier is liabilities and insurance. So when you're looking to get government approval to complete a cultural burn, in a lot of cases they will want you to have liability insurance, proof of accredited expertise, PPE, heavy machinery, pumps and hoses, etc., etc., etc. And that can be an issue if the community doesn't have the capacity or the resources to acquire all these things. And because a lot of the forests where these burns are needed have so much fuel buildup because burns haven't been done there in so long, they take a lot of time, a lot of power, and a lot of money to be done safely. And there's not a lot of funding available to do that. However, the work is still being done and it is making an impact.
This is just the final turn on protecting the reserve, helping nature out like we used to back in the day.
Indigenous communities are in a race to protect themselves. They're bringing back a tradition that was banned for decades.
We have to learn from our mistakes. Now we have to correct them.
We got ticket board back. I'm gonna need some more burners here, you guys.
We've been invited to the Bridge River Indian Band, or Hoiston, about 300 kilometers north of Vancouver, where a big plan is unfolding.
We in California, and I think we in the Western U.S. in general, have a fire suppression culture. And that's obviously really problematic given how important fire is and how natural it is to these places. The fires that we're seeing now that are so catastrophic, they're the result of years of imbalance, decades of imbalance.
Growing up in Caddo country and in the heart of Caddo country, I understood that fire was a main element to our way of life. Our communities are trying to bring back that good fire. We're bringing back something that hasn't been here for generations.
I work with this national team and we host these events called Prescribed Fire Training Exchanges. It's really about empowering and supporting people so that we can make these changes and see a difference on the ground.
We're going to get started today, and again, my name's Vicki Preston, and I'm here with this other group of ladies. We come from like a long line of, burning women, of weaving women, of women who've lived here and gathered, and
it's really important for Indigenous people to remain part of this fire conversation, this larger fire conversation, because we've been doing this in our places since time immemorial. We have this long-standing science, if you want to call it, cultural knowledge in these places. So it's a huge deal that tribes are pushing to be able to go out and gather and manage, and that needs to happen, and tribal folks want that to happen so that these places are healthy and not having these huge wildfires.
In one study that I read, 79% of cultural or prescribed burning projects led to increases in biodiversity, representing a positive impact on ecosystem health. And fire stewardship is just one way to manage and protect lands. A review of globally protected areas across the planet showed that Indigenous managed land, so lands either owned, governed, titled, or unceded Indigenous lands, had higher levels of biodiversity than parks or protected areas under conventional management.
So solastalgia is a concept that's been talking about more in health and the environment, and it's basically people feeling a loss for a loss of the place that they're within. So whether that place looks different, factors such as drought, places maybe not being even livable anymore.
And in a lot of the videos that I watched on fire stewardship, the topic of youth was brought up a lot. It was a common theme that it was really important that youth be engaged in fire stewardship so that they would have the knowledge and the tools to keep cultural burning practices going in the future.
This was an invitation from the community to come. They were wanting to open up and share their culture and the way they do things, and that was an exciting opportunity to learn about who they are, their identity, and the story that they want to tell. Looking at Francis and some of the leaders of the community and how they engaged with the youth, what really stood out to me is the approach of we're celebrating our culture and passing on our knowledge, done in a way where it draws the youth into it.
We do a lot of cultural activities. We go out to gather medicines with the youth and with elders. We take kids down to the river to fish to see how we've done it in the past. Our history is passed down orally. So when you pass a certain area or a certain landmark, you tell a story of what happened in that area or what was done in that area so that the knowledge is passed down. It's important to keep telling the story so that those live on and are passed down to generations.
There we go.
There you go. Work your way that way.
I'm obviously excited to be here in the spring doing this work, and today I had my daughter Nailina out with me.
It's gonna help the grass the little seedlings get up, and it's gonna have fresh grass. We'll get more plants and trees, and the animals will be happy.
Her reflections is that she sees fire as beautiful. So yeah, I think for myself, I'm just trying to take a little opportunity of encouraging her to be comfortable with fire, trying to encourage her what to observe and how to look at the land. For all the work that we do as a community, this is the type of work that we need to pass things on to the next generation.
And that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope I did this topic justice. So sorry that it's been a few months since my last video. I've been dealing with some stuff.
Hey Terry, you want some?
It's full of gallstones.
And we hit over 100 subscribers, which is really cool. So thank you to everyone who's subscribed. It means a lot that you're interested in these really long-winded video essays. So, I'll try to keep them coming. And thanks to everyone who keeps leaving really kind and supportive comments on my videos. I keep getting blown away by how thoughtful everyone is. I guess when you put something out on the internet, you expect like the worst, right? But it seems like my videos have been finding some really great people who are interested in this stuff just like I am. So this is just all around awesome. And shout out to Envy Talk To, who let me know that in my Fast Runner video, when I misspelled Atanarjuat as Anatarjuat, I literally called him the great well-known shit, which made me laugh a lot, and also I am so sorry. And here's some pictures of my dog Molly, because I think she's the best, and when I'm working on my videos, she's usually beside me sleeping and snoring really loud. And with that, I leave you, so please let me know what you think of this video, and let me know what you'd like to see next. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.